Welcome to What's Working. Let's do this. I'm Cam Marston. Nice to have you on the show with me today. Taking a listen. I hope you find something helpful in today's episode of What's Working. This is another one of the episodes where my timing got mixed up and I ended up interviewing the guest prior to recording the opening so I can be my little Nostradamus self and tell you what to expect as we go along. First, what is What's Working? If you're new to the show, and I thank you for joining in, we focus on workplace, workforce, and marketplace trends on this show. We try to find guests that can talk about the trends in such a way that you and I, as we listen, can identify something that we can adopt and bring into our own workplace. My guests, I try to tease the questions out of the guests that they'll answer in such a way that will give you and me something to do, something that we can do to make our own workplace, our own world, our own lives, whatever it may be, just a little bit better than it was. Today's guest is Rebecca Swanner. Rebecca, and I'll get further into this as I get her on the line, she's an architect and she's out in Los Angeles. Her firm is one of the largest architectural and engineering design firms in the U.S. And if you've been around architects, if you know the nature of the business, they're free thinkers. The profession attracts that type of person, and then they get in there, it seems to me, and they're surrounded by other people like themselves, and their free thinking comes even freer. Rebecca's expertise is in building workplaces that foster creativity, and a number of different things, but one of which is fosters creativity. We're going to talk to her about how that works when we get her on the show here in a little bit. You'll hear that. But I present a question to her that was presented to me yesterday. Yesterday, I was in Dallas. I was giving a presentation to a group of a manufacturer as well as their distributors that make some high-pressure hoses and gauges and pumps, things of this nature, industrial products. Very sophisticated, very expensive, very complicated products. One of the questions that was posed to me in advance of the event was, Cam, in your presentation to our group, there were about 850 people in the room, by the way. So it wasn't a dialogue. I couldn't stop and say, so what do you think? It was a presentation, 850. In your presentation, Cam, address this for us. How do we get people to come back to work? We're struggling to get our employees to return to the office place. We're struggling to get them here. One of the pieces of data I cite in the presentation and I'll share with Rebecca is 30% of a company's market value can be tied to their culture. And if culture is something that can only be developed in person, it can be grown, enhanced, birthed in person. You can hardly have a culture that is grown, enhanced, or birthed in a Zoom call, in a Teams call, in a work-from-home environment. And I don't think anybody would disagree with that. You can put a Band-Aid on a culture. You can keep it. You can maintain a status quo of a culture in a work-from-home environment. But it takes being physically together to maintain it, to grow it, to birth it. So if 30% of a company's value is in their culture, and that culture must be eye contact, physical space shared together, working shoulder to shoulder, side to side, face to face, and we can't get people to come back to work, it's not a good omen for the future of our business. So again, back to the question that was presented to me, Cam, how do we get people to come back to work? And I told him the best that I had at that time, and I've told this on this broadcast before. In the new year, I'm going to interview a guy from Stanford who is the bottom line, according to his bio, on what the impact of work from home has been to the workplace. We'll get him in the new year. But what do we do to get them back? So I, as you'll hear in a little bit, bring this very same question to this lady who is in one of the coolest, biggest, largest architectural firms who have had to attract their own staff back to work. They think differently, and she'll give us some insights on workplace design meant to encourage people back to work. I can preface this by saying the workplace will never be the way it was. It will never be the way it was. I think we all kind of know that, but are hoping for some vestiges of it. It's done. When we come back from break, it'll be Rebecca Swanner, me via a Zoom call, workplace sector leader of HED, big architecture firm. Be right back.
This is Seth Cherniak, Vice President of Branch Development for the Jeffrey Matthews Financial Group. If you're an experienced financial advisor wanting the freedom of independence but aren't sure making that jump is right for you, we should talk. Jeffrey Matthews has developed a successful program for advisors who don't want to be 1099 contractors and don't want to pay for their own overhead. We're looking for advisors who want the freedom to run their business the way they see fit with the support that comes with a W-2 firm. If you're interested in joining one of our branches, or if you want to open your own branch as a full-time employee, let's chat. Our compensation plan is one of the most competitive among all W-2 firms, big or small. Reach out to us today at jeffreymatthews.com, connect with me, Seth Cherniak, on LinkedIn, or click the link in the podcast.
Jeffrey Matthews Financial Group, member FINRA, SIPC. We're back. You're listening to What's Working. I'm Cam Marston. I'm on a Zoom call today. On the other side of the call is Rebecca Swanner. She is in L.A., I think in L.A., and I got a bio from her about the workplace design, the significances of workplace design and how they're designed to, or can be designed to foster creativity, collaboration. They can support team environments. They can promote the brand, the services, even enhance the culture of the organization in which they work. Rebecca, thank you so much for your time. Welcome to What's Working.
Thank you. I'm excited to be here.
Let me tell you a little bit. Let me introduce you to my listener as we get into this, as we got kind of the first question queued, but I want you to think about who's listening. I want you to picture this person in your mind who we're trying to help through this show. He or she is 45 years old or older. They're typically an influencer and leader in their workplace. When they hear a good idea, they have the permission and the responsibility to act on it. So what I try to do is find guests like yourself who can say things that will tease ideas out for these guests. And I want you to keep him or her. And incidentally, about 70 to 75% of my listeners are male, so it's predominantly male. I want you to keep them in mind as we go through this. So let's begin. Rebecca Swanner, tell us a little bit about yourself, the architectural firm. Let's get some background on you before we jump deep into this.
Great. So I am actually from the East Coast, but I do live in Los Angeles. I've been here about 15 years. I'm a licensed architect, but I lead workplace design, so mostly interior design and workplace strategy for HED. And we are a national full-service architecture and interiors and engineering firm. And since I do design in Los Angeles, although I focus on workplace, there's a lot that comes into workplace in Los Angeles. So we were speaking earlier, I've done radio stations design, broadcast, all different types of multimedia type spaces as well. And I'm thrilled to be here and speak with you this morning.
We're glad to have you. It says in your bio here that HED's LA office was recently designed with your own innovation workspace features in mind. Tell me a little bit about that. I think so many organizations ignore their own footprint in order to help others. It sounds like you focused on yourself. What was it and what is it now?
Yeah, so the timing was really interesting because a couple of the leases of our various office spaces were coming up right around COVID, just before, during, and after. So we had the opportunity to rethink those and how we would work differently after our staff became used to working fully remote. So in the Los Angeles office and our other offices, a lot of them are free address, which means people do not have assigned desks. We do have neighborhoods, and we're designing a lot of spaces these days where desks are not assigned, but neighborhoods are. So it gives people the flexibility they want and the choice they want and how they're going to work in a given day, but still responds to that human desire for territoriality and a sense of ownership and belonging, which really is the prime motivator for people coming into the office.
Oh my goodness. So many places, so many tangents to jump into here. First, help me with some definitions. Neighborhoods. I'm not familiar with this term in relation to office space. Tell me what that means.
Yes. So when someone, if you have a hybrid schedule for your employees and they're coming in on different days of the week, when they come in, it's really important that they're going to bump into the people with whom they're collaborating. And so let's say you have 50 or 80 employees. If you have neighborhoods, that's a home base. So it's a place where a specific team or department, and that can be different size depending on, your organization. Maybe it's 5 people, maybe it's 15 to 20 people, and it's home base. So they know if they're taking a heads down, let's say desk, they're going to take it in a certain neighborhood that's dedicated to their team, and they can leave things up in that area. So there might be things on the whiteboard, or kind of a war room type table where they've left out different things they're working on. And so that way, when they come in, they have visibility to who in their team is working there that day to ensure they're going to be able to meet up and collaborate.
You mentioned the work from home post-pandemic, or during the pandemic that is extended post-pandemic. I told you this prior to the recording, and I want the audience to listen to this. Yesterday, I was in Dallas. There were 850 people in the audience, and their question for me was, Cam, what are you learning about getting people to come back to work? The complaint for a lot of these people in the room, most had white hair, was that they couldn't get their under 35-year-olds to return to work. They have invested in them. They have trained them. These under 35-year-olds have some talents and skills that they need, but getting them back into the office place is proving to be very, very challenging. Cam, they said, what's working out there? And I said, listen, I got some things. I've talked to some people. But then I saw your interview coming up on the schedule, and I said, I wish I had had this interview with her Monday to relate to this audience yesterday. What's working in regards to office design that it will compel, particularly for some reason, younger employees to return to the office?
Well, I want to start by addressing that age bracket, that demographic, the young workers, because it's not, it makes complete sense that the younger demographic is really digging their heels in. And here's why. If you think about it, every single year that passes since the pandemic, there's a new crop of graduates who don't have the same frame of reference regarding work that we do. For most of my career, there was an expectation that I would come to the office. I'd be there at least 9 to 5, Monday through Friday. And that's the reality. It's the default. I'm comfortable with it. It's familiar. This new crop of graduates, that's not their reality. They graduated, and their, first and formative years in the workplace were primarily remote. And even, the younger ones that did have the experience of going into the office for a couple years, it's not the bulk of their experience. So it's not ingrained. And I think also, they're more open to new ways of working, whereas some of the generations that have been doing it the same way, for 2, 3, 4, 5 decades, it's much harder to shift. I was at a Cornet conference last month. It was actually in October. It was in Denver, and I couldn't believe it coming from LA. It snowed. I almost got stuck in LA and couldn't go. And there was a speaker, and I'm going to credit, his name was Peter Sheehan. And he said, the crucial shift required for agility is to compress your time to acceptance. So I think for us, speaking to your audience specifically, to be successful, we really need to let go of the baggage and the preconceptions about how it was before. And we can't assume that we're going to get exactly back to the way we were. That's not on the table right now.
I've told them that the new flex schedule and the new hybrid workplace is the future. We did not have this conversation, but my suspicion is their response would be, but I'm the boss. I want to be able to talk to them. I still want to be able to see them. I am an old school in that time spent at the desk equals time spent at working. I'm paying them not to do what they want to do, but what I need them to do. And part of what I need them to do is to be visible members of this team, whether it be in the neighborhood, to use the terminology you just introduced me to, or to my personal team, the boss may say. And I need them to come back to work. And I want to see these people that I'm paying collaborate with one another, to talk to one another about leads that they're generating, to talk to each other about new products. I quoted a statistic yesterday that I found online. Now, does that make it accurate? No, it just is a compelling thought. 30% of a company's market value is in their culture. And culture is notoriously difficult to create and to sustain in a work from home environment. You can put Band-Aids on it, but you cannot create it. You cannot enhance it. You can't build it. People need eye contact to do that. Your response?
So I'm going to reply with a statistic that says people should be in the office about 60% of the time to maximize productivity.
Yeah.
So I do think workplace has a role. I also don't think the physical office is going away. And I do think it can play a really crucial role in building culture.
We need to go to break here, Rebecca. We're going to take a break real quick. Let's pick up that comment. And there's a couple other things that I learned from my audience yesterday that I think will factor into our conversation. And let's face it, we still haven't talked about workplace design. This is Cam Marston. You're listening to What's Working, on the line with Rebecca Swanner. She's in LA. She's an architect. We're talking workplace. We'll be right back.
This is Bill Eastet. I perfected my baking recipe behind my live music stage at my little restaurant in Fairhope, Alabama. We have custom-made smokers and small batch bacon made just for you. So if you're looking for the best bacon in America that has been cured, smoked, and even serenaded by songwriters, you definitely need to try Billy's Small Batch Bacon. www.billiesbacon.com.
Rebecca Swanner is the workplace sector leader of HED. It's one of the largest architectural and engineering firms in the U.S., serving clients nationally in a broad range of market sectors, and after that is a long list of market sectors. Rebecca, prior to the break, we were having a conversation about trying to get people back into the workplace. The goal being, is there some sort of redesign of the workplace that may be enticing people back there? And my clients, as I told you yesterday in Dallas, we're saying, essentially, we're the boss. We want you here. 30% of our market value is in, this is the statistic that I cited, is in the culture of the organization, and cultures cannot be sustained in a work-from-home environment. We are the boss, and we deserve to have people in the door. You are going to react to that. Go ahead, please.
Yeah, so you talked about measuring people's contributions based on whether or not the boss can see them at their desk. And I think I ask your audience to challenge that notion because there's a lot of statistics around, a company looks at their culture and how many days are people coming in, how many hours are they spending in the office? And I don't think that that's necessarily the most important thing to measure. I don't think their contribution is tied to hours in the office. I would say instead, it's tied to their results and their productivity. And that's really how we should be measuring employees, and also the experiences they're having in the office. So let's say company A, their people come in 5 days a week and they're spending 90% of their time, on the phone, or different Zoom meetings, talking to different people in different parts of the world, and they're not interacting with each other, and they're not very productive, and they're not very happy. I mean, that's not going to, these are all businesses. So it's about the bottom line. Those uninspired employees who are there every single day probably aren't doing their best work. If we can compare that to company B, where their people come in 2 or 3 days a week, they come in for specific purposes, and they have very specific experiences that enable them to do their job better, and also enable them to connect on a human level with their colleagues. They're going to be more dedicated. They're going to be more loyal. I mean, you talked about the idea of how difficult it is to find and retain talent, especially after you've trained them. I mean, we want to hold on to people. And I think the workplace and the programs that allow people to use the workplace properly can really support that. And we can talk about how a workplace can be designed to foster collaboration and experiences, if that's helpful.
No, it's what I want. I think that's going to be a core. I'm hoping that becomes a core part of our conversation. The people that listen to the show, like I said in the previous segment, are people that can say, that's a good idea. We're going to change things. And I want to throw some ideas out to the listeners who may say, let's do change some things. So I understand your point. You've made a great point, and I don't completely disagree with it. What we're arguing against, or let's take the white hair in the audience yesterday, is still the attitude of, I'm the boss, I need to see you, this is what I'm paying for. Even if you're unhappy, unproductive, and just downright mean when you're here, this is what I'm paying for, which doesn't make sense, frankly, but that's kind of what the attitude is. All right, let's talk about your specialty. Define for me, I don't want to say the workplace of the future, define for me the workplace that might entice people to come back to work. What does it look like? What does it feel like? When you walk into a quote unquote traditional workplace, you say, all right, we're going to start at the fundamentals with these changes. What are those changes?
Yeah, so I think we're fundamentally changing the way we design the workspace, and there's a big focus on activity-based design. So when you enter the workplace, you have a choice depending on what you're doing that day. If you're meeting with people in person, you might book a meeting room. If you're doing heads down work, maybe it's a phone booth or a hoteling desk. If you are working with something with physical materials, or, there's different types of, might be an open collaboration area, so that you're not just choosing, I'm going to work in one place, in one posture for the entire day. I'm going to choose based on what I'm doing for this, couple hour chunk of time, where I'm going to work. Because the idea that the workstation is like Inspector Gadget, or like a transformer where it can change and adapt to support all the different things that an employee might do throughout the day perfectly, is really setting that space up to fail. So the idea is you have very specifically designed different spaces, a variety, and people can choose and move throughout the day and have different experiences in that space. And I would also say the comment about, I want to see you working, I would say, what is it you want to see? It doesn't make sense. Employees don't want to be watched, like Big Brother while they're doing data entry or something like that. That doesn't make sense. But they would love to be engaged with. So come into the office for meetings, come into the office for a group lunch. When we designed our LA office, the entire office is designed around a central, I would say, social hub. And one day a week, the day that everyone is in, all departments, all teams, the office orders lunch, and we all break bread together. People I'm working with, people I'm not working with. And I think that's been really helpful from a culture perspective, in bringing people together and breaking bread together. And I would say to any business owners, if your office right now is not designed in a way where your entire staff can break bread together, which I think is really important, that's okay. Bring them into your home. During COVID, I had my team over for dinner in my backyard. We all took COVID tests before we met, and there were people that we'd hired during the pandemic that I'd never met in person, and bringing them into my home, to, outdoors, of course, to just share a meal together was a great way of connecting and really helping culture.
Part of the presumption that you're presenting here, Rebecca, is that work has changed.
Yes.
I feel like part of the presumption is that the stereotype or the image that people have of what quote unquote work is no longer realistic. Work has changed, and the workplaces are retaining the previous design in a changed work world. Agree or disagree?
I agree to an extent. I think it's really hard, not just for business owners, but also for people in my industry, to really, in a snow globe, kind of say, look, here's the office of the future, because there's a lot we don't know, because a lot of the research is still coming out. And I would say also because things changed so fast that technology hasn't caught up to it yet.
Interesting.
And I think that's a really big piece of the puzzle. And I think there is a rub, and hybrid work isn't seamless. And the only way to make it more seamless is through technology, and that technology doesn't exist yet.
Wow.
And we can't imagine it because it doesn't exist. I mean, think about before cell phones or the internet existed. You couldn't fathom that. Like, I think the changes will be that drastic when it comes to technology to support a new way of working. And I think we can't imagine it yet.
So how do you build a space with something that you don't know exactly what's coming?
So that's actually a really great comment. And with a lot of our clients, we suggest that they kind of let us test things out. So maybe before they move, we redesign a portion of their space and see how people use it. But I think, yeah, it's not realistic that you're going to design a space today and 30 years from now, it's going to function in the same way. We try not to embed technology because technology changes so rapidly and it's such a big investment. But I do think this idea of activity-based design, I don't think that's going away. And the ability to offer your employees a space that has a variety of options in which to work, I think there's some staying power to that because you're intentionally designing it with choice and variety. You're not putting all of your eggs in one basket.
We're coming to a break here, but real quickly, what is your experience with space being a recruiting tool? Come look at our space. This is where you're going to work.
Yeah. So especially if we're talking about the 35 and under crowd,
yeah.
I was a late adopter to Instagram, but there's definitely the talk of the Instagrammable moments within the workplace, and we've definitely been tasked to design those.
Lovely. I'm on with Rebecca Swanner. She's in LA, workplace sector leader at HED. And when we come back, Rebecca, you guys are forward thinking. You're pretty cool. You're pretty creative. I want to know what your workplace schedule is like, what your return to work schedule is like. You're on the cutting edge. We'll be right back.
This is Seth Cherniak, Vice President of Branch Development for the Jeffrey Matthews Financial Group. If you're an experienced financial advisor wanting the freedom of independence, but aren't sure making that jump is right for you, we should talk. Jeffrey Matthews has developed a successful program for advisors who don't want to be 1099 contractors and don't want to pay for their own overhead. We're looking for advisors who want the freedom to run their business the way they see fit, with the support that comes with a W-2 firm. If you're interested in joining one of our branches, or if you want to open your own branch as a full-time employee, let's chat. Our compensation plan is one of the most competitive among all W-2 firms, big or small. Reach out to us today at jeffreymatthews.com, connect with me, Seth Cherniak, on LinkedIn, or click the link in the podcast.
Jeffrey Matthews Financial Group, member FINRA, SIPC. You're listening to What's Working. We're back. I'm Cam Marston. On the other side of a Zoom call from me in the great city of Los Angeles is Rebecca Swanner. She is a licensed architect with 15 plus years of experience leading products for national and global brands, including JP Morgan, Disney, Marvel, and Apple Music. Rebecca, prior to the break, we were talking a little bit about how your return to work has happened as an organization. Architectural firms are notoriously cutting edge, kind of free thinkers, and the employers there have to keep people like you, and you have to keep people on your team coming back to work and find the right schedule. What have you done at HED?
So it's a great question, and I will share the fact that it's not consistent across different offices. So I would say to anyone out there who has multiple office locations in your portfolio, you don't have to have the same policy at every office. There are regional differences. We have in some of our offices that are in more suburban markets, for that staff, it makes more sense for them to come in more frequently. They often live closer to the office, whereas in some of our more densely populated metropolitan locations, downtown districts, it's harder for people to get into the office every day because there's traffic, parking is expensive. Some of the rubs with commuting, there's a little bit more friction around those in places like downtown Los Angeles. So I will share at our downtown LA office, our staff is coming in 2 days a week. And one of those days each week, we are ordering lunch for the entire staff, and we all stop at noon and break bread together and catch up with each other, which I think is really great. And although there are 2 days a week mandated so that we do see each other. Different people come in addition on different days. I think it's really not a one size fits all solution. I have two young children at home, so for me, I really appreciate the ability to work from home a couple days a week. But then there are also, junior teammates who might live in a tiny micro apartment with 3 roommates and 2 dogs. And so for them, the ability to come into the office every day is actually great. For those people who really don't have a dedicated home office. We also have tools in the workplace that we can't replicate at home. Whether it's model making tools or different software or the ability to pin up, and collaborate and sketch in person. So I do have a lot of clients that recognize there are parts of what they do that really demand in-office tools or in-office collaboration. So we really want to design the workspace in a way that supports those specific activities and say, listen, these types of things you can do at home. And that's fine. But these other types of activities, you really need a physical space that supports that type of work. And let's design a space that is really specialized to support that. So people do feel compelled because it's just easier to get certain types of work done in certain types of spaces.
Let me ask you 2 questions. Number 1, your team is required to be in the office, if I understood you correctly, twice per week. Is that right?
Mm-hmm. Correct.
And do you determine what 2 days those are? For example, every Tuesday and Wednesday, the whole team's got to be here. Or is it everybody's got to be here on Wednesday plus 1 full day of your choosing?
Exactly. It's the latter. It's Thursdays. We're all together. We order lunch together. It's a really social day. I personally try to avoid having back-to-back virtual meetings on Thursdays because I want to be present and I want to be able to connect socially with people in the office. And then the other day really is a flex day based on what makes sense with people's schedules.
Yeah. Have you measured productivity to see whether there is a gain? Has it ebbed, or is it what it used to be?
So we're actually getting ready to roll out a series of surveys to study our own portfolio because we do have 3 offices next month. It will be 4 offices nationally that have evolved post-pandemic. So we are getting ready to look into that and study it on a deeper level. But I can even say, during the pandemic, when everyone was remote, we know that creativity and innovation were really challenged. And we can look at that based on the number of patents that were submitted during the pandemic. I mean, it went way down. So, we know it's a fact. People are not as creative when they're not in person. Innovation does go down. So there is a place for the office. I think it's just about finding the right balance. And again, it could be regional. It's not, if you have multiple offices, it's not the same for every office. But what is the right balance to give your employees the benefit of the flexibility of work from home, which is a free benefit. It costs you nothing. And it means a lot to a lot of employees for different reasons. Maybe they have families, maybe they have other hobbies. And how do you balance it in a way that has them in doing the right things at the right time with the right people, but also the sense of freedom and flexibility and also trust. I think a lot of it is about trust in your employees to make the decisions that they need to make to be the most productive.
Quick question for you.
Mm-hmm.
It sounds as if to fully engage in a project, you all need to not only know what your client does, how they make money, and what the process is that they use to make money, but you almost have to get into their belief about the value and the role of staff and team members. Who are they? What do you think about them, et cetera? Is your discovery process with your clients solely about the process of earning revenue? Or is it about what are your personnel being an old word, I'm sorry to use it, but what are your staff policies?
Yeah, no, it's definitely both. And that front end part, that workplace strategy part, in the most successful projects, we are engaged very early on. Before a client is even touring potential spaces with a broker, they've engaged us to talk high level about where their company is going culturally and what types of spaces can support that. So I think that's a really important piece of it. And too often, I would say, we're brought on once the space has already been, it's this space, it's this size, and these are our goals. Ideally, we're brought to the table really early on to help develop those goals and to lead workshops with their staff. I think user engagement is really critical, not just to affect a better outcome, but also so that they feel heard. And if they're a part of the decision-making process, you get buy-in. Those people who are at the table become the Pied Pipers for the company and also the project and the new way of working.
Yeah, Pied Piper, led them all into the cave and killed them. So let's use bell cow. Let's use the bell cow. They're the bell cows. They'll follow the bell cow. What are the workplace amenities these days? I see this on this kind of information that was sent in advance. The most popular and growing workplace amenities. I'm very curious what this would be.
Yeah, so I would say definitely the idea of a concierge. When people come to the office, if they're not there every day, they might arrive and there's something in their way that is preventing them from doing their best work. Oh, I don't have my mouse today. I left my headset at home. I can't connect to the network, whatever it is. So the idea of having a concierge, and at this CoreNet conference I was at, there was a speaker of a very large national corporation, and she mentioned that their concierge initially was going to be staffed by facilities folks, and they instead have it now staffed by hospitality folks. So people who used to be flight attendants or in the restaurant business or hotel business, and the feedback has been remarkable.
Yeah.
So the fact that there's a place where people can come in, it's almost like instead of having an IT office, you have the Genius Bar.
Yeah.
Where there's someone there who says, I see you're frustrated. Let me help you work through that. So that, I think, has been a great amenity.
So many of your clients have got to be big companies. How do you scale this back to a 30-person company?
Yeah, that's a great question. And I think for the smaller companies, for a lot of the larger amenities, they're depending on the landlord to provide these. So in Class A buildings, we're seeing more of these tech bars or conferencing spaces or spaces where you can host a lunch for your entire staff as part of the building. So you don't have to own that.
How do they find you, Rebecca?
They can find me on LinkedIn, Rebecca Swanner, LinkedIn, and my company has a website, hed.design, but feel free to drop me a line. I'm happy to chat.
Thank you, Rebecca. This has been really enlightening, very thought-provoking. I'm grateful for your thoughts, your insights, and your expertise that you were willing to share. I really appreciate it. That's Rebecca Swanner, folks. You'll find her contact info in the podcast notes of the show. We'll be right back.
I'm Joey Mason. For 4 years, my goal has been to produce the best farm-to-table products I'd ever eaten. I've done just that at our on-site USDA facility in Grand Bay, Alabama, allowing us to ship directly to your door. This is true farm-to-table. Visit us at masonhillsfarm.com to see all that we have to offer.
There may be, 2 more hours of content with Rebecca, if we could manage it. Her thoughts and her insights and her expertise on workplace design, really pretty cool, pretty thought-provoking. Now, I told her as we started who the listener was, who, my understanding, most of you are. A business owner, predominantly a small business owner, which means maybe up to 30, 40 people. Probably most have many fewer than that. Many few millions of dollars in revenue, fewer than the clients it sounds like she works with. So more mom and pop than corporate Fortune 500. How do we take these ideas about the workplace and the workplace design and adopt them to probably what most of you and I are familiar with, something more modest, something more moderate? It would be nice to work with, as Rebecca, it sounds like she does, with clients. She mentions Apple, JP Morgan. Where's that list of her clients? Apple, JP Morgan, Disney, Marvel, who have extraordinary budgets to build the workplace of their dreams. That must be great. You go in and say, we can create something special here. But for most of us, you're working with a much more limited budget. You can't order new furniture all the time. Anyway, how do we take the ideas, the compelling ideas that she gave us, and try to incorporate them? Neighborhoods, you remember that conversation where people who have work on similar things, similar designs, similar projects, similar whatever it may be, are in proximity to one another so that they can bump into one another, much like a neighborhood. I guess that's where the name comes from. Free-floating movement from the desks, not a cube that you go to every day, but a movement around the office place, etc. There are a lot of designs here, or ideas here. Yes, we could all simply say, this is not for me. I don't want to do this. However, my suspicion is, as we look into the future of the workplace, the signs are already out there that this is coming. The signs are already out there, perhaps, that this is here, that a redesign of our own workplace in some modest way will have impact on productivity. I thought it was also very interesting that she said the number of patents that have either been applied for or awarded, I'm not sure which she said, dropped during the pandemic, indicating a reduction of creativity during that time. Therefore, bringing people together does increase productivity. But I also saw a piece of data not long ago that a flexible work schedule, a hybrid, let me get that correct, hybrid work schedule is proving to be more profitable for organizations. They're getting more productivity out. No silver bullet on any of this. The trick is to figure out where we can apply this into organizations like our own. I encourage you to look her up. She generously offered to answer questions, and I hope you'll do so. Anyway, Rebecca Swanner, you'll find her contact information in the podcast notes of this broadcast if you want to look further or reach out to her on LinkedIn. Rebecca Swanner, spelled it just the way it sounds. And I appreciate her time. That was great. All right, we're wrapping up here on What's Working. The year is either, depending on when this broadcasts, either just over or soon to be over. I think it was just over. And we got a whole new growth year ahead of us. The show is now into 21 markets. We picked up another market this morning and eager and excited for the growth. You're listening to What's Working. Thanks for tuning in. We'll have another show next week. Have a good week, everybody. As you likely know, this show originates as a radio show broadcast across the state of Alabama, and it continues to grow in both radio listeners and market. After it's formatted for radio, we then turn it into this podcast. Please share it with those you think would find it interesting, and subscribe to the podcast on my YouTube page where you can leave messages and your thoughts and your comments, and I'll certainly get back in touch. Finally, if you're a fan of the show, please offer a review on Apple Podcasts or Spotify. You can find my book called What Works on Amazon.com. In it, I highlight the top 10 ideas from the first 200 episodes of the show. Mind you, they're not the top 10 best episodes, they're the top 10 best ideas. Many times the same ideas are brought up again and again by different guests, and we dig into those ideas in such a way that they'll be easily applicable for your business. Simply go to Amazon and enter my name, and you'll find What Works as well as my other books. Chapter titles include How to Find a Niche, Innovation, Building Teams, and so forth. To learn more about the workshops and seminars I offer, go to cammarston.com. There you can view clips of my work, view workshop titles, view my reviews, case studies, customer lists. It's all there. If you'd like a free copy of one of the chapters of my book, enter your email address at the bottom of the homepage at cammarston.com. And from that site, you can email me directly. I always love to hear from you. You'll also find me on social media. Find Cam Marston on all the social media platforms, and you may need to enter the numeral 1. There's one other Cam Marston out there, and that numeral 1 distinguishes me from him from time to time. So if you're unsure if it's me or not, enter that numeral 1 after my name, and it should do the trick. On a more personal and less professional side, I record weekly commentaries that air across Alabama on Alabama Public Radio twice each day on Fridays called Keeping It Real. They've won statewide and national awards. They're simple observations on the world as it goes on around me, and they're only a few minutes long. They're a passion. You can find them on the same podcast app you're using to listen to this. Finally, if you're interested in advertising on this podcast or the radio show, reach out. I've worked hard to cultivate a specific listener, and I can tell you all about them, and I have many different options for helping you reach them. Thanks again for listening. We'll have another episode available soon.